Hey everyone, Cody from Mac Telecom Networks. So I put a post on my community page on my YouTube channel asking if you'd want to see a full build with a Unifi network in the new controller. And the majority of you said yes. We were also voting on if we wanted to do it in one long video or we wanted to do it in sections. And 71% of you said they'd like one long video. So that is what this is going to be. I'll put timestamps down below if you want to skip to certain sections, as this is going to be a long video. It will be similar to my other Unifi full builds, but it will be in the new UI. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. Make sure to hit the bell icon. If you'd like to hire me for network consulting, visit www.mactelecomnetworks.com. You'd find us on Instagram at mactelecomnetworks. And we have a Discord server, which I'll put a link in the description below. The first thing to consider when building a Unifi network is where you're going to host the controller. So if you have a UDM base model or the UDM Pro, it has a controller built inside of it. But if you have a USG Pro 4, or any other device, you're going to need that controller hosted elsewhere. We could use a cloud key which has the network controller on it, or we could also download the controller directly to our PC. You could host this on a server as well. If you're an MSP and you want to host it in the cloud, the solution I use is Hostify. So I have the majority of my customers sitting on a Hostify server. For this video, I'll be using a UDM Pro, so I'll have my controller built into the device itself. Before we get into any configuration, let's go over the topology of the equipment that I have. At the top, we have my internet connection going into the WAN port of the UDM Pro. From the SFP Plus port, we're going into an aggregation switch Pro, and then from the aggregation switch Pro, we're going into my Unifi Enterprise switch PoE, we're going into a Unifi switch Flex, and then we have a switch Lite 16 PoE that's plugging into my Enterprise 24 PoE. The reason it's not plugging into my aggregation switch Pro right now, I'm waiting on an SFP copper module. We also have my UNVR Pro plugged into the aggregation switch, and then from the Unifi Enterprise 24 PoE, we have a bunch of cameras connected as well as access points. So the access points that I'll be using is two Unifi 6 LR access points. These are Wi-Fi 6 compatible. And then I have an in-wall HD, and then I have a Unifi 6 Lite access point. So the networks we're going to create will have my main LAN at 192.168.10.1/24, and then we'll have a management VLAN. So this management VLAN will be for all of my Ubiquiti devices. We'll have an IoT network on 192.168.30.1/24. We'll have a camera on 192.168.40.1/24, and then we'll have a guest on 192.168.50.1/24. The Wi-Fi networks we're going to create is Mac Telecom, which will be sitting on my LAN. This computer will be the only thing that's able to connect to it. And then we have my IoT, which most of my devices in my house, TVs, PlayStations, Xboxes, smart light switches, they'll be connected to that. We'll have the Queen's House, which is our guest network, and then we'll have Mac Telecom camera for my Wi-Fi cameras. The first thing we need to do is get our UDM Pro configured with internet access. I have a static IP address, so I'll have to assign the UDM Pro that static IP, but most of you will probably have a DHCP address. To find where our UDM Pro is sitting, we could go down to a command line, and then we could type in ipconfig. From here, you could see that our default gateway is 192.168.1.1. So I'll type that into a browser. And it's bringing up our UDM Pro. It's saying connecting to the internet. It won't get an internet connection as I haven't configured that static IP. But typically, you should be connected right away. I'm going to go to Advanced Internet Options. And my connection type is going to be static IP address. If you have PPPoE, you'd choose that as well. Now, depending on the WAN interface you're going to be choosing, if you're using a fiber optic cable or if you're using a copper cable, this is the interface. I'm going to be using a copper cable, so we'll be using the WAN. If you're using fiber optics, you could have WAN 2, which is the SFP. I'll fill in my IP address, my gateway, my subnet mask, and then my DNS servers, and then we'll press next. Now that I've added my static information, it's going to be checking for the internet speed. And we could see internet connected. We'll press next. And it's telling us UI is committed to protecting your privacy and security. We'll just say set up UDM. Now we're going to give it a console name. I'm going to call it Mac Telecom. And then we're going to agree to the end user license and press next. Now we need to select a setup type, so either personal or for business. I'm not really too sure if this affects your config at all, but I'll select business. And then it's going to ask you for a business type. I'll scroll down and I'll pick technology and telecommunications. And then it will ask us our business size. I'll just say small business and we'll press next. Now you need to have a Unifi account to log into the UDM Pro. If you don't, you could say create account. I'm going to type in my username and password and then press next. Now in this next step, it says select a backup. So if you need to recover, you could select a backup, but we're going to be doing this completely new. So I'll say continue without backup. And then we have an update schedule. So it says daily, and we're not going to have this on at all. I'm going to disable it and then press next. We leave auto optimize on for now, but if we run into issues, we'll end up turning that off, and I'll press next. Now it's testing our speed, which is pretty much what my internet provider promises me, and we'll press next. And this last step is just going to be to review your information, and we can press finish. And it's going to set up your console, which will take a few minutes. Now it's all loaded, and we could see this is the main page of my UDM Pro. It may look similar if you're using a Cloud Key Gen 2, as it's using the new Unifi OS. So we have our network controller, we have our protect controller, we have access and talk. We have one admin under manage user, and then we have our system settings. Let's go into the system settings. From the system settings, you could see the console name, you could see your WAN IP address, you could see the gateway IP, the MAC address, you could see the owner of the console, we could see the uptime, the current Unifi OS version, and then we could see compliance details. Below that, we could see performance. So we could see our CPU load, we could see CPU temperature, and our memory. If we scroll down even further, we could see hardware, so we could see the processor, and then we could see the memory that's built into the UDM Pro. We could also see storage and capacity. So we have internal storage and then we have disk storage. Now it's important to stay up to date with firmware updates, and we could take a look at that on the left-hand pane. We could see overall that our UDM Pro is up to date on version 1.10.4, and we could see when it was last checked. We could also see the release channel, which is official. If you want, you could do release candidate or you could do beta. Under our network controller, we could see there's an update available. The current version is 6.2.26 and it's under the official channel, and we could see the same for the Protect controller. I'm going to go ahead and update this network controller. I won't be using Unifi Protect through my Unifi Dream Machine, so we could click on these three dots and we could press stop. I will be using Unifi Access and Unifi Talk once it's available in Canada, so we'll leave these as is. If we scroll lower down, we turned off automatic updates, but if you want to turn them on, you could do so. So we have the Unifi Dream Machine Pro, we could click on the toggle switch, and then we have our application. Under location and time, this is where we'll be doing our geofencing. I'm not going to do anything to this, but you can if you'd like. And then we could click on advanced. Under advanced, we could rename our console, we could turn on SSH, and we could have on remote access. If you want to remotely manage your UDM Pro or look at your Unifi Protect cameras through the UDM Pro, you need to have remote access on. We could enable analytics and improvements, and then we have some console controls. Under the console controls, we could restart, power off, factory reset, download a support file, or we could restore the console from a backup. We also have backup config, so this will push a backup of our UDM Pro controller to our account.ui.com. If you want to have this turned off, just check off the toggle switch, and you could do a backup now. You could also specify when we want to schedule the backups. I have mine every Monday weekly at 12 a.m. We could also download a backup file direct. Now we've seen the settings of the UDM Pro, let's get into our network controller. And the network controller updated to 6.4.54. We'll click on the network, and this is our dashboard. At the top, it's saying not seeing everything you need, and you could go to the classic dashboard. Where my face is covering, you could see the WAN IP address and the gateway IP. And below that, we have our system utilization. We have our system uptime, we have the internet, we have our uptime, and then we have our latency. We could run a speed test and see the down utilization, and we could see the up utilization. In the middle, we could see a traffic overview, which we don't have any traffic currently running. And then we have client devices, which it shows we have Windows and we have other. At the bottom, it's just showing some verbiage for some Unifi gear. So if we go back to our drawing, we want to set the main LAN to 192.168.10.1/24. We're currently on 192.168.1.1. So we'll go down to the settings wheel, and then we'll select networks. From the networks, we'll select our LAN. Then we'll select advanced and scroll down. We can see that we have a DHCP server on and it says to auto scale network. We don't want to have that. We'll check it off. And now we could switch what our subnet is. So I'll put it on 192.168.10.1/24, and then we'll auto configure the DHCP range. Now the DHCP range starts from 192.168.10.6 to 254, and we'll apply the changes. Now that we've switched the LAN subnet, the next thing we need to do is adopt all of our unified devices. So if we look in the left pane, we'll see unified devices. And here are all the devices that could be adopted into my controller. We have my U6 Lite, we have my Enterprise 24 PoE, U6LR, another U6LR, and then a bunch of switches. So we need to click on each one of these devices and then press Adopt Device. While the devices are adopting, we could create our networks. So let's look back at our topology. And the networks we need to create are our management network, IoT, camera, and guest. So we'll start with our management. We'll go to the settings wheel, and then we'll click on networks. Here we're going to add a new network. We're going to give it a network name of management. And then the router is going to be our Mac Telecom, which is the UDM Pro. If you have any layer 3 switches, you could use that as well. And then we need to go down to advanced. We need to give it a VLAN ID, and for this network, it will be VLAN 20. I like to match my third octet to the VLAN. We'll scroll down and we'll turn off auto scale. We'll select our gateway IP subnet. Right now it's at 192.168.2.1. We're going to switch that to 20.1 and then auto configure the DHCP and press add network. Next, we need to do the same thing for our IoT network. So we'll add new network. We'll call it IoT. The router will be Mac Telecom. Go down to advanced, and then we'll give it a VLAN ID of 30. We'll turn off auto scale and we'll put the subnet as 192.168.30.1/24, and then we'll auto configure the DHCP and press add network. We'll do our camera network, so it will be name of camera, and then advanced, put it on VLAN ID 40, turn off auto scale, and the subnet will be 192.168.40.1/24, auto configure the DHCP, add the network, and the last one we need to do is our guest network. So we'll call it guest, and then we'll press advanced. We'll give it a VLAN ID of 50, and then we're going to turn on device isolation so it can't talk to anything else but the internet. We'll scroll down and we'll deselect auto scale, and we'll give it a subnet of 192.168.50.1/24, auto configure the DHCP, and add the network. Now that we've created all of our VLANs, we need to create our Wi-Fi network, and we'll start with Mac Telecom. I'll go back to my Unifi controller, and then we'll click Wi-Fi networks. Here we're going to add a new Wi-Fi network, and this will be called Mac Telecom. We need to specify a password. It must be a minimum of 8 characters, and then we need to select the network that it's going to be on. For Mac Telecom, it's going to be on the LAN. We could take a look at advanced settings. Here we could have different Wi-Fi bands. If we just want this to go over the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz, we could set it. I'm going to leave it at both. And then we could optimize for IoT Wi-Fi connectivity. Everything else I'm going to leave at default, and we'll press add Wi-Fi network. The next network we need to create is our IoT network. We'll add new Wi-Fi network. We'll call it Dolores, and then we'll give it a password. Under the network, we're going to specify the IoT network. In advanced, we want to have the IoT optimization turned on, and we'll press add Wi-Fi network. The next Wi-Fi network we need to create is our Mac Telecom camera. So I'll call it Mac Telecom camera, give it a password, and then we need to specify the camera LAN. So we'll press camera and then add Wi-Fi network. And the last Wi-Fi network we need to create is our guest network. So we'll call it the Queen's House, and then we'll give it a password. We'll specify the network, which will be our guest, and then we'll add Wi-Fi network. We now have our VLANs created and our Wi-Fi networks. We need to go back to our devices and make sure they don't have any firmware updates. So I'll click on Unified Devices, and there's two different views that you could look at your devices. There's this list view, or there's the icon view. We'll go back to the list view, and we can see that pretty much every device requires a firmware update. I'll start with my access points, and then I'll move down to the switches. So all we need to do is click on the update available, and it's going to tell us, are you sure you want to upgrade the in-wall HD from 5.60.18 to 5.60.19, and I'll press confirm. The updates do take a few minutes, and it will boot you off the wireless. Now the firmware upgrades have been applied to all of our devices. We need to set all these devices onto our management VLAN. So all we need to do is click on each of the switches and access points, go to settings, and then we need to go to services. Under services, we could see where the management VLAN is. I'll click on the drop-down menu, and then we'll select management. We'll scroll down and we'll press apply changes. I'll do that for every other switch and access points, and then we'll be back. All the switches and access points are now in the management network. The next thing we need to do, we need to put our wired devices on the correct network. So we could go over to our clients tab, and then we could do display options. Here we could filter out just for our wired network. We could see my desktop computer here, and then we have an Xbox. So the Xbox, we would want to put that onto the IoT network. We'll click on the client, and we could see that it's on the USW 16PoE on port 1. So we'll go over to the switch and then press settings. Under the settings tab, we'll go down to ports. We'll select port 1, and then we'll go to port profile. Currently, all the ports will be set to all, which means they're a trunk port and all VLANs could pass over it, which we don't want. So we'll click the drop-down menu, and we'll scroll down to our IoT network. We'll press apply changes, and now that port 1, so my Xbox, is on the IoT network. I need to do the same thing for all of my cameras. We can see my UNVR Pro, it's currently on the 192.168.10.169, but we need that to be on the camera network. We'll click on the UNVR Pro. We see that it's on the USW Pro aggregation on port 23. We'll go to settings, and then we'll go to ports. We'll scroll down to port 23. I'm going to give this a name of UNVR Pro, and then we'll put it in the port profile of our camera network, and then apply changes. So I'm going to go through the list, make sure all of my cameras are on the correct VLAN, as well as my IoT devices. And this next section will be for network security, so we'll be taking a look at our firewall and threat management. We'll start off with our firewall. So I'll click on my settings wheel, and then we'll go over to traffic and security. To find the firewall in the new user interface, we need to go to global threat management. We'll scroll down and we can see firewall. I'm not really a huge fan of how they do the firewall in the new user interface. I typically go back to the classic view, but for this video, we'll stay in the new user interface. First thing I'll do is to create a new group. And this new group will be called RFC 1918. And the type that this will be an IPv4 address subnet, and then we're going to add an address. This is all of our private IP addresses. So the first address will be 192.168.0.0/16. The second address will be 172.16.0.0/12. And then the third address will be 10.0.0.0/8. And we'll press apply changes. The first section of firewall rules we'll be making is under our LAN interface. So we'll click on the LAN and then create new rule. The type will be LAN in, and then we're going to allow established and related. We're going to enable this rule, and then the rule applied will be before predefined rules. We're going to accept the traffic, and then we're going to use all the protocols. The source and destination will be any, and then under advanced, we're going to want to turn on the toggle switch for match state established and match state related, and press apply. And the next rule under the LAN that we're going to want to create is the drop invalid state. So we'll create new rule, and then the type will be LAN in, and we'll call it drop invalid state. We're going to have it enabled, and then our action will be to drop. The protocols will be all source and destination any, and then under advanced, we're going to want to match invalid state and press apply. Under the firewall rules, we could see they go top down. So we want to allow established and related and then drop invalid state. So the next firewall rule we're going to create is to allow our main LAN access to everything. So the type will be LAN in. The description will be allow LAN to all VLANs. Before the predefined rules, we're going to accept the traffic, and then the protocols will be all. The source is going to be a network of our LAN, and the destination is going to be that group that we created. So it will be the RFC 1918, and then we'll press apply changes. And the next rule we want to create is our block inter VLAN routing. So our IoT network won't be able to see our LAN network, management, or guest, and vice versa. So we'll create new rule. It will be under our LAN in, and I'll call it block inter VLAN routing. The action will be to drop the protocols all, and the source will be that group of RFC 1918, and the destination will be RFC 1918 as well, and we'll press apply changes. Now our IoT network can't see our LAN network, our management network, cameras, or our guest network, but it could still get to the gateways of each of those networks. So it could get to 192.168.40.1 for our camera network, or the 10.1, which is our LAN network, and we don't want that to happen. So what we need to do, we need to create a new group, and I'm going to call this new group block IoT to gateways. The type is going to be IPv4 address subnet, and then we're going to add the gateways of every other gateway except the IoT. So if we look back here, we're going to have to add in 192.168.10.1, 20.1, 40, and 50.1. We'll type 192.168.10.1. Then we'll add an address of 192.168.20.1, 192.168.40.1, and then 192.168.50.1, and then we'll apply the changes. Now to make it so the IoT can't reach those gateways, we need to create a new rule. This time under the type, it's going to be LAN local. And then we're going to call it block IoT to gateways. The action is going to be to drop. The source is going to be a network of our IoT. And then the destination will be that new group we created. So block IoT to gateways, and we'll press apply changes. But if we were on our IoT network, we could still reach 192.168.30.1, which is the IoT gateway. There's no way to block that IP address, but we can block the port group of HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. So we'll scroll down and we need to create two groups. The first one will be the IoT gateway, and this will be the IPv4 address of our gateway. So 192.168.30.1, and we'll press apply changes. The next group will be for HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. And it will be a port group, and we'll add the ports. So we'll add port 80, we'll add port 443, and then we'll add port 22, and press apply changes. Now back under the LAN, we're going to create a new rule. It will be under LAN local, and this will be to block IoT to firewall interface. We're going to drop the traffic. The source is going to be our IoT, and then the destination will be the IPv4 address group of the IoT gateway, and then the port group of HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH, and we'll press apply changes. So we need to do that for every other subnet besides the guest. Because we put on device isolation, the guests automatically create the firewall rules for us. But it's the same steps as I did for the IoT network. Now let's take a look at threat management. At the top, it says detect and block intrusions to my network. Receive an alert when threats or malicious activity are detected on your network, and automatically block threats and malicious activity on your network. So currently it's turned off. We could have it just to alert us, or we could have it to detect and block, which I'm going to have. Below that, we have our system sensitivity. So we have maximum performance, and at the other end, we have maximum protection. I typically put mine on 3, which is balanced. We could also scroll down and see advanced features and customizations. So we have restrict access to malicious IPs, and then we have restrict access to the Tor network. We also have a threat management allow list. So if we want to create a new allow list, that's where we would do it. Below that, we have our signature suppression, and then we have network scanners. So the threat scanner, if we have this turned on, it will scan all of our networks and tell us what ports are open on the devices. I'll leave that off for now. And then we have internal honeypots. Apply honeypot to your networks to detect malware, worms, and other type of malicious traffic attempting to scan your network for vulnerabilities. We are going to turn that on. So we'll create a honeypot. This will be for our LAN network, and it always takes the .2 of whatever subnet you're on. We'll create, then we'll create a honeypot for the rest of our networks. We need to click on honeypot and then press create. And it will keep going down the list until we have no more networks to create on. So that's it. We have our LAN management, IoT, camera, and our guest. Below that, we have our customized threat management. So here's where you could turn on and off different customizations. We have our virus and malware. We have our P2P. We have our hacking. I'm going to turn on denial of service. And then we have our internet traffic types. Everything else I'll leave at default, and we'll press apply changes. Now to go to our threat management dashboard, we need to go over to the left pane and click on the shield. This is the threat management. Under the threat management, this will show us an overview. And from the overview, we could block countries. So we could block China if we want. We could block Iran. We could block Brazil, any country that you want. If you want to unblock them, you just go to the block countries list and press unblock. You could also specify which direction you want to do it in. So this is both, or you could specify incoming or outgoing. In the bottom left-hand corner, it will show you the total threats by severity, high, medium, or low, top threats by geography, attempt, severity, source, top threats by classification, attempts, and severity. If you have any threats, it will show under this traffic log. If you turned on the network scanning, it will show under endpoint scans, and then honeypot will show under the honeypot. One other thing we could do to protect ourselves and have better security is to do MAC address filtering. So on my cameras, I only want to have that camera MAC address being able to use that port. If somebody pulled my camera down and plugged a laptop in, they wouldn't be able to access that. So we'll go over to my client list, and then we'll pick my garage camera. This garage camera is connected to my USW Enterprise port 3. I'm going to copy the MAC address, and then we'll go to port 3. Under port 3, we have the MAC ID filter allow list. We're going to copy and paste the MAC address, and then we'll press add MAC ID. Then we'll press apply changes. So now this will lock this port to that MAC address, and the camera will be the only thing that's able to go onto it. And that's it for this video. I'm sure I missed a couple things, but it's already been going fairly long. If you have any questions about this video, please leave it in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you're new here, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. All right, thanks.